The wooden hull of the USS Constitution sliced through the icy Atlantic waves as British cannonballs clanged harmlessly off its sides. Sailors in blue coats shouted orders as the frigate HMS Guerrière loomed in the distance, its black flag snapping in the wind, while the American crew prepared their own guns for the coming clash. In the shipyards of Boston, timber was hauled by oxen, and the keel was laid in 1797, the timber beams shaped by skilled carpenters who fitted each plank with precision. The vessel was named for the newly adopted United States Constitution, and its launch in 1797 drew a crowd of townspeople who cheered as the ship slid into the water, its three masts rising like the sails of a great bird ready to cross the ocean. The Constitution entered active service in 1799, its crew of 300 men manning the decks as it chased French privateers during the Quasi-War. You can see the ship cutting through the sea, its sails full, the gun ports open, and the cannon crews loading powder and shot with practiced speed, the smell of salt and gunpowder filling the air. In August 1812, the Constitution encountered the British frigate HMS Guerrière off the coast of Nova Scotia. The two ships exchanged broadsides, the British cannons roaring while the American guns thundered, and the smoke from the explosions drifted across the water. When the British captain saw the American hull, he remarked that the shots bounced off as if the ship were made of iron, a comment that would echo through history. The battle ended with the Guerrière disabled and its crew forced to surrender, and American newspapers printed the phrase "Old Ironsides" in bold headlines. Crowds gathered in Boston streets, waving flags and singing songs, while the Constitution's crew celebrated with cheers that rose above the harbor, the ship's name becoming a symbol of resilience and national pride. In 1815, the Constitution sailed to the Mediterranean as part of the United States' effort to protect American merchant vessels from the Tripolitan corsairs. You can picture the ship gliding past the cliffs of Malta, its sails catching the Mediterranean breeze, and its guns firing at enemy vessels near the shores of Tripoli, the clash of cannon fire echoing across the water. By 1880, the Constitution was taken out of active service, its hull showing the scars of battle and the wear of decades at sea. Workers in a Boston dry dock began the painstaking task of repairing the timbers, replacing rotten planks, and preserving the historic structure for future generations, the sound of hammer and chisel filling the workshop. Today, the Constitution rests in Boston Harbor, its three masts towering above the water as tourists walk its decks, touching the same wood that withstood cannon fire over 2 centuries ago. The ship's preservation continues, with ongoing maintenance and educational programs that let visitors experience the legacy of a vessel that never sank. The next chapter of Old Ironsides began not with a fanfare of battle, but with the low hum of a city waking to industry. In the early 1900s, the hull was towed beneath the shadow of the massive Quincy Machine Works, where steam-powered planers shaved away warped planks and a fresh coat of copper sheathing was hammered into place. You can see the workers' faces illuminated by oil lamps, the glow of molten metal as rivets were set into the deck, the rhythm of the foreman's commands echoing across the shipyard. This painstaking work was more than repair. It was a declaration that a nation would not let its oldest warship become a relic of dust. When the United States entered the First World War in 1917, the Constitution was no longer a fighting vessel, yet her silhouette still dominated the Boston skyline. The Navy attached a small contingent of sailors to act as caretakers, their uniforms crisp against the weather-worn railings. In the evenings, the lanterns along the gun decks flickered like distant beacons, a reminder that even in peace, the ship served as a living museum of naval heritage. Archival footage shows crowds gathered on the promenade, schoolchildren pointing at the towering masts, their faces reflecting the amber light of a setting sun. The interwar years brought a new urgency to preserve the ship for future generations. In 1931, the United States Navy commissioned a comprehensive survey of the Constitution's structural integrity. Engineers in crisp dress coats descended into the cramped below-deck compartments, their lanterns casting stark shadows over the cramped mess decks and the cramped storage of cordite barrels that had long since been removed. They measured the curvature of the hull, noting where dry rot had begun to eat at the oak frames. Their reports, now housed in the National Archives, called for a massive full-hull restoration, a project that would not be realized until the nation faced its greatest crisis later that decade. As the world spiraled into conflict again, the Constitution's image was repurposed for morale. In 1942, during the height of the Second World War, a series of wartime posters featured an imposing render of the ship, its three towering masts silhouetted against a backdrop of exploding artillery. The caption read, "We will stand as steadfast as old Ironsides," Propaganda reels showed the vessel sailing through a storm of depth charges, the thunder of cannons overlaid with the triumphant strains of the Star-Spangled Banner. Though the ship never left Boston Harbor, the imagery galvanized a nation that was fighting on distant seas. That same year, a new wave of preservation began under the direction of the Boston Naval Historical Society. Volunteers, many of them veterans who had served on destroyers in the Atlantic, descended the gangplank with sandpaper, clamps, and a reverence for history that turned each brushstroke into a ritual. You can picture them working in the rain-slicked dock, the iron scent of rust mingling with the salty air, while a nearby crane lifted massive oak beams into place. The society documented each step on 16 film, preserving not only the ship's physical form but the very act of its salvation. When the war ended, the Constitution found herself at the center of a national conversation about heritage and identity. In 1949, a televised ceremony broadcast across the United States showed President Harry S. Truman standing on the quarterdeck, his hand resting on the rail as a ceremonial salute was fired. The camera lingered on the bronze cannons, each one bearing the patina of centuries, before pulling back to reveal the full expanse of the ship against the early morning mist that clung to Boston Harbor. The broadcast reached millions, reinforcing the idea that the Constitution was more than wood and iron. She was a living embodiment of the nation's resolve. The 1950s ushered in a new era of scientific restoration. Naval architect John D. McClellan was hired to oversee a structural overhaul that would incorporate modern preservation techniques while remaining faithful to the ship's original design. Using blueprints drawn by the ship's original builder, Joshua Humphreys, McClellan directed teams to install a hidden steel framework within the hull, an invisible skeleton that would bear the weight of the aging timbers. In the dimly lit workshop, engineers used early ultrasonic testing equipment, a novel technology at the time, to detect hidden cracks and moisture pockets. The audience can imagine the soft beeping of the devices, the tension as a flaw was discovered, and the collective sigh of relief when it was corrected. During the turbulent 1960s, the Constitution became a stage for social change. In 1968, a group of civil rights activists boarded the ship to protest the exclusion of African American sailors from certain historic reenactments. The scene was captured on black and white newsreel. Demonstrators marching across the main deck, their banners flapping in the wind, while the historic cannons loomed in the background. The ensuing dialogue led to the integration of all aboard programs, ensuring that the ship's story would reflect the diverse tapestry of those who served under the flag. The following decade brought a surge of educational initiatives. In 1975, the National Park Service partnered with the Boston Museum of Fine Arts to develop an immersive living history exhibit aboard the Constitution. Costumed interpreters, dressed in period uniforms, performed drills as the ship's bell rang out across the harbor. Visitors could watch a mock boarding action, the clatter of musket fire replaced by the soft thud of wooden swords, while the echo of the ship's own prow, once cut through the waves at the Battle of the Chesapeake, resounded in the boundless open sky. The cameras of the day captured children's wide eyes as they listened to the narrated accounts of Captain William S. Seeley, who had commanded the vessel during the War of 1812, his voice rendered through a vintage microphone that crackled with historic weight. In the 1990s, further innovation arrived in the form of computer-aided restoration planning. Naval historians digitized the ship's original lines, creating a three-dimensional model that could be rotated and examined in minute detail. This allowed conservators to simulate the impact of various preservation treatments before applying them to the actual hull. You can visualize a team of specialists huddled over a glowing screen, the model rotating as a soft click highlighted stress points along the keel. This blend of old-world craftsmanship and cutting-edge technology ensured that every nail driven, every plank replaced, would honor the ship's authentic structure. The turn of the millennium saw the Constitution become a focal point for international diplomatic gestures. In 2001, the ship hosted a joint ceremony between the United States and the United Kingdom, commemorating the 200th anniversary of the Treaty of Ghent, which ended the War of 1812. Flags from both nations fluttered from the mainmast, their colors vivid against an overcast sky, while dignitaries exchanged honors on the weathered deck. The moment was filmed in high definition, allowing viewers today to see every ripple of the harbor water, each glint of sunlight on the brass fittings, and the solemn faces of those paying tribute to a shared past. Preservation efforts have never ceased. Each summer, crews of naval engineers and skilled craftsmen descend upon the ship to inspect the copper sheathing, replace rivets, and apply fresh coats of marine varnish. The sounding of the ship's bell, now polished to a bright sheen, marks the beginning and end of each workday, its tones resonating across the water like a heartbeat. On stormy evenings, you can hear the wind howl through the rigging, the sails creaking as they sway, a reminder that even in quiet harbor, the spirit of a 44-year-old warship persists. Education remains at the heart of the mission. Modern classrooms have embraced virtual reality tours that allow students to step aboard the Constitution without leaving their desks. Wearing lightweight headsets, they can walk the gun decks, feel the sway of the hull, and watch reenacted battles unfold in full motion. The technology overlays historical photographs onto the present-day environment, turning the vessel into a living textbook. The narrative voice guides them through key moments, like the fierce broadsides at the Battle of Valcour Island or the daring rescue of the frigate USS Chesapeake, each described with the same cinematic cadence that has carried the ship's story for centuries. Today, the guard that once protected the fledgling republic stands as a beacon of endurance. The Constitution's 3 masts, trimmed with freshly painted canvas, rise against a backdrop of modern skyscrapers, bridging past and present. As a ferry glides past, its passengers glance up, their reflections shimmering on the polished brass railings. The harbor's waters, still occasionally breaking over the ship's massive bow, whisper stories of thunderous cannon fire, long-dead sailors, and the unyielding resolve that has kept her afloat across 250 years. The legacy of old Ironsides is not confined to wood and iron. It lives in the collective memory of a nation that has repeatedly looked to its history for guidance. Every plank replaced, every cannon restored, every visitor who steps aboard carries forward a tradition of perseverance. The ship that could never sink remains a steadfast reminder that, even as the world changes around it, the principles of courage, duty, and sacrifice endure, etched into the very timbers that continue to ride the waves of Boston Harbor. The roar of artillery over Boston Harbor in 1812 still reverberates in the minds of those who stand on the Constitution's deck and trace the grooves cut into the oak, planking by cannon fire. Captain Isaac Hull, then a 35-year-old prodigy, ordered the gun crews to load the long 24-pounders that would soon rip apart HMS Guerriere, a British frigate thought to be invincible. When the British ship's masts fell and its hull cracked under the relentless broadside, the American vessel earned a nickname that would echo through generations: Old Ironsides. The British sailors who survived were stunned. They could not believe that wood reinforced with live oak could withstand the ferocious discharge of iron shot that seemed to bounce off the hull like hail. The battle did not end there. In less than a year, the Constitution, under Captain William Bainbridge, set sail for the Atlantic coast of South America, where a squadron of British frigates threatened American merchant ships. On February 25, 1813, the Constitution intercepted HMS Java off the Brazilian coast. Within hours, the British frigate's hull, heavily scarred by the Constitution's relentless fire, surrendered. The spectacle of Java's shattered masts collapsing into the sea became a vivid tableau in newspapers across the United States, inspiring a wave of patriotic fervor. The victory cemented the Constitution's place as the premier warship of the young Navy and proved that a nation of modest resources could field a vessel that could outmatch the most seasoned British ships. Those early triumphs were not isolated incidents. They were the product of a meticulous design conceived by Joshua Humphreys in 1795. Humphreys insisted on a hull built of thick live oak for the keel and frames, reinforced with white oak and elm for the hull planking, and fitted with a deep keel that lowered the ship's center of gravity, granting unparalleled stability. The Navy's limited budget forced the shipwrights to use locally sourced timber, yet they managed to embed an unprecedented amount of iron in the hull's structure, laying a foundation that would later survive centuries of wear. The Constitution's hull, measuring 204 feet from bow to stern, housed a gun deck with 44 guns, 24 12-pounders on the gun deck, 24 32-pounders on the upper deck, and later additions of 2 long 24-pounders on the forecastle. Each cannon was cast from iron sourced from the Massachusetts foundry of John H. Hall, and each gun crew was trained in the drill system perfected by Captain John Barry during the Revolutionary War. Beyond its combat record, the Constitution served as a diplomatic instrument. In 1803, under Captain Thomas Macdonough, the ship sailed to the Mediterranean to protect American merchant shipping during the First Barbary War. The crew patrolled the waters off Tunis and Algiers, confronting the Barbary corsairs that preyed upon trade routes. Though the Constitution never engaged the larger Barbary fleets directly, its presence forced the Pashas of North Africa to acknowledge American resolve. The ship's logbooks record frequent encounters with smaller corsair vessels, describing how the Constitution's broadside could silence a pirate galley within minutes, compelling them to abandon their prize ships or flee. These actions demonstrated that the United States could project naval power far beyond its shores, a fact that impressed European powers and helped shape early diplomatic negotiations with the Barbary states. After the War of 1812, the Constitution entered a quieter phase, but its importance remained undiminished. In 1828, the vessel was placed in ordinary at the Washington Navy Yard, awaiting a potential reactivation. During this period, the ship's namesake, Captain Charles Stewart, then a senior officer, oversaw a comprehensive refit that replaced worn timbers with fresh oak harvested from the forests of Maine, ensuring the hull's integrity for another generation. Though Stewart never commanded the ship in active combat, he took responsibility for preserving the Constitution's weapons and ammunition caches, storing them in the ship's central hold where they could be quickly accessed should conflict arise again. His meticulous care ensured that the ship remained ready for deployment during the tense political climate that preceded the Civil War. When the Civil War erupted, the Constitution was recommissioned as a training ship for naval cadets. In 1862, the vessel was anchored in Boston Harbor, where it became a floating classroom for the United States Naval Academy. Cadets learned the fundamentals of naval warfare, gunnery drills, sail handling, and ship handling. By actually climbing the rigging, manning the cannons, and navigating the vessel in simulated battles, the cadets' experiences were captured in photographs that show the young men standing on the gun decks, hands gripping the polished brass fittings, eyes fixed on the smoke-filled horizon. These images, taken by early photographic pioneers such as Matthew Brady, served as a visual testament to the ship's enduring role as a living museum of seamanship. In the early 20th century, the Constitution faced the possibility of scrapping as newer steel warships rendered its wooden hull obsolete. Public sentiment surged when a newspaper editorial, published in 1905, declared, "The Constitution shall not be sold for scrap while the flag still flies." A national fundraising campaign ensued, and in 1907 the ship was refloated and transferred to the Boston Navy Yard for restoration. Engineers replaced over 8,000 board feet of timber, reinforced the keel with a steel brace, and installed a new copper sheathing to protect the hull from marine borers. By 1911, the Constitution was designated a museum ship, an honor it retains today. The restoration required meticulous archival research, cross-referencing shipbuilding records from the National Archives, and consulting the memoirs of former crew members to ensure that each repair mirrored the original construction techniques. The Constitution's endurance through more than 2 centuries is not merely a testament to superior craftsmanship. It embodies the evolution of American naval doctrine. During the Spanish-American War of 1898, the ship's guns were test-fired from its deck to provide fire support for troops ashore in Cuba, showcasing its ability to adapt from a traditional sailing warship to a platform capable of delivering artillery fire in a modern conflict. In World War I, the Constitution served as a training